Another disposition in order to read the gospel with profit, as we may also infer from the words of St. Paul, is a great esteem and reverence even for things which appear mean and little to the eyes of the flesh. Those who behold them with the eyes of faith, while they therein contemplate the righteousness and the life of faith, say with St. Paul that they are not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation to every one that believeth. St. Paul, in saying that it is the power of God, does in this one expression comprehend everything great and magnificent which can be spoken to the advantage of this divine book. For his meaning is that if we consider the eternal truths therein declared, it is God who speaks therein, it is God also of whom he speaks, and he speaks as God, because at one and the same time he therein speaks both in such a manner as is suitable to his greatness and infinite majesty, and to the depth of the mystery he reveals, and likewise in such a manner as is adapted to the meanness of those whom he instructs, and to the different capacity of those who read these heavenly oracles. If we consider in them the past matters of fact which are there recorded, what can we find in all the histories extant which does at all come near this? A God who was born in a stable, and who dies upon a cross, who is at once both God and man, whose whole life is but one continued series of miracles which could be the effect of nothing but a divine power, and whose humiliations, sufferings, and death appeared more powerful and miraculous than his miracles themselves. These having almost generally only hardened those who had the greatest reputation for wisdom and sanctity among his people, whereas the former converted even his enemies and executioners. As to those future things which are there foretold by this God-man, nothing was ever at one and the same time so credible and incredible. The destruction of that temple, that city, and that people which God had established by so many wonders, and by the subversion of so many nations, the raising up of another people who were the fill of the whole earth, after they had been formed into a body of 12 fishermen in the midst of persecutions, and of a deluge of blood, and in opposition to all the powers of the earth. These wonders already come to pass were so visible that they afford us a full security as to that which remains still to be fulfilled, namely, the universal judgment which a crucified God shall pass upon all mankind at the end of the world in the sight of heaven and earth, and the consummation of the church of the saints in the glory of eternity, where all the magnificent promises made to the elect throughout the whole Scripture shall be fully and perfectly accomplished. In fine, the means which we there plainly see were chosen by Christ to the forming of these great designs, the manner of life, and the laws he prescribes to those who are to compose his new people, and the rules of the Christian morality which he there teaches, are so worthy of admiration that at the same time that human wisdom is confounded and pride humbled, we cannot but adore the treasures of the wisdom and knowledge of God which lie therein hid, and are constrained to cry out that the finger of God is there, that the gospel is truly the power of God unto salvation to every one that believeth. But it is not the power of God unto salvation, except only when the finger of God, that is his Spirit's, vouchsafes to write in our hearts the faith or belief of the eternal truths and mysteries of Christ, the hope of the accomplishment of the promises and of the good things to come, and charity or the love of his law, his precepts, and his evangelical maxims. For without this quickening spirit, the letter, even of the gospel, is a letter which killeth, and this savour of life is, by our abuse of it, changed into the savour of death. For whence it is easy to infer that in order to read it with advantage, it is necessary to join to this holy exercise much fervent prayer as may draw down upon us his Spirit and his benediction. Our own sanctification, as well as the sanctity of his word, requires that our reading should have more in it of adoration than of study. And since even the food of our body ought to be received with prayer and thanksgiving, how much more ought this spiritual food to be so, which is not at all beneficial to the soul, but only so far as the heart is open to receive it, and the eternal truth speaks to the heart. But the best preparation for the reading of the gospel as we ought is to love it, and we cannot possibly love and relish it unless the love of eternal treasures reign in our heart, or at least begin to gain ground therein, by a desire to devote ourselves to the service of God, and a purpose and resolution to seek his kingdom and the righteousness thereof. The understanding of the truths of the gospel is the fruit of the purity of our manners. Our lives must be conformable to the gospel if we desire to attain to the knowledge of the secrets, of the mysteries, and of the holiness of the evangelical perfection. We must disengage our minds from the love of carnal and perishing things, and we must love those which are heavenly and eternal. To qualify us to take delight in a book, the whole design whereof is to destroy the former sort of love, and to establish the latter upon the ruins thereof. For it is called by Jesus Christ the gospel, or the gospel of the kingdom, as St. Matthew has it, the gospel of the grace of God by the apostle of grace, the gospel of the glory of Christ, and the gospel of peace by the same apostle in other places. And it is called by these appellations on no other account but because it declares to us the accomplishment of the spiritual promises, and informs us that Jesus Christ, the high priest of good things to come, appeared at last in the world to impart to us his grace and his spirit, thereby to conduct us in his ways to our heavenly country, and there put us into the possession and enjoyment of those things good in the bosom of God which are reserved for his elect. Not that the gospel may not and ought not to be read even by those whose lives are irregular and disorderly. On the contrary, such are to be invited to seek after remedies in this holy book for their blindness and concupiscence. And who can tell but that it is the design of God to make use of some of these words to open their eyes and to convert them to himself, as he heretofore touched the heart of St. Anthony, and changed it in a moment by one word of the gospel which he heard as he entered into the church, and as he converted St. Augustine by one single sentence of St. Paul. We must therefore, if possible, prevail with them to read the gospel, but at the same time we must, as St. Augustine says, take from them, as from children, those childish amusements with which their minds are so foolishly employed, that we may substitute in their stead things more useful, as being for persons grown up to full age, and that they may raise themselves from the earth on which we see them groveling. We must speak to them in the words of the same saint: Rise, seek, pour forth signs and ardent desires, and knock at the gate which you find shut against you. Let us then purify our hearts by the reading of the gospel, and this reading will still purify them to a great degree. Let us sanctify our manners by our respect and reverence towards this holy book, and this book will still sanctify us more and more. Let us kindle within us a warm and ardent affection for this word of fire, and this fire will inflame our hearts to such a degree as to make us cry out with admiration as did the two disciples. Did not our heart burn within us while he talked with us by the way, and while he opened to us the Scriptures? Let us make those sweets which God has preserved for us in the word of his Son our chief delight, and we shall quickly find that the delicious word will daily turn all that the world calls delight and diversion into bitterness. In short, we shall find our instruction, our strength, our consolation, our counsel, our security and protection in these treasures which God has deposited in the lands of the Church, to be distributed by her to her children. In the word of Jesus Christ we shall learn how the heart of Christ is affected towards us, and how that of a Christian ought to be affected toward him. And the divine wisdom, concealed and covered, as it were, under this adorable letter, coming into our hearts, all sorts of good things will come into them along with it. The bare sight of the gospel, says St. Chrysostom, is sufficient to induce us to regulate our thoughts and desires, and to us a disgust towards the things of this life. When this sacred book is in any house, it is like an arsenal filled with arms, which keeps it in a perfect safety. It removes all the power of hell at a distance, and the devil dares not enter it. Only to cast our eyes upon this book with reverence is enough sometimes to prevent our falling into sin. It is enough to awaken our conscience and to raise in us a salutary shame on the account of those sins into which we have been so unfortunate as to fall. But if to this we join a careful and diligent reading, the soul will find itself, as it were, in a divine sanctuary, and become more pure and perfect by means of the conversation it has with God in reading His holy word. Neither is this only a sanctuary, it is, according to St. Augustine, a heaven, where God clearly manifests to us the wonders of His grace, the riches of His mercy, and the adorable designs of His wisdom and His power. Let us enter, then, with confidence into this sanctuary, consecrated by the blood of our beloved Savior. Let us raise ourselves and ascend into this heaven which His Spirit has framed for us here on earth. Let us open the eyes of our faith, and with reverence, gratitude, and love contemplate the treasures and good things which are the patrimony and inheritance of the children of promise. And let every one of us offer up with St. Augustine this prayer in order to obtain the light and grace necessary to our improvement by the reading of this book of Jesus Christ. Grant us the grace, O my God, to take a clear and distinct view of this heaven which is the work of Thy hands. Dispel those mists from before our eyes which hide it from them. It is in these divine books that those oracles are contained by which Thou dost communicate wisdom to the humble. Exalt Thy glory to its utmost height by the mouth of those who speak to us in these books, and whom we may style babes from the simplicity of their language. For we know no other books capable like these to destroy pride and to overthrow Thy enemies, namely those who would fain excuse themselves in their sins, and who thereby only more obstruct their reconciliation with Thee. No, my God, I know none comparable to these holy books. They are these which have made me bow my neck to Thy yoke, which have prevailed upon me to confess my miseries to Thee, and which have taught me to serve Thee with a free and voluntary worship. Cause me then to understand them, O Father of mercies, and let that gracious favor be the reward of the submission which I pay them. For Thou hast established their authority upon so firm a foundation only for the sake of those who should submit themselves thereto.